Welcome, curious soul, to Tales of the Tattered Book. I am your host, the keeper of the book. With each passing moment, new horrors appear on these weathered pages, yearning to be told. As I open this arcane tome, remember, knowledge comes at a price, and some truths are better left unspoken. Tonight, the Tattered Book reveals 3 tales of terror, bound by a single cursed object. In the shadows of an antique armoire, darkness takes many forms: a childlike voice in the night, a creature glimpsed through feline eyes, and a doll with amber eyes that should never blink. Gather close, dear listeners, as we unveil these interconnected horrors from pages stained with generations of fear. Our first story is titled The Armoire.
8-year-old Tommy Thompson jerked awake in his bed, his pajamas damp with cold sweat. 3:33 a.m. glowed on his bedside clock, just like every night this week. He knew what was coming.
Tommy, come play with me.
That voice again, soft, sing-song, almost childlike. It came from his armoire, the massive antique wardrobe that loomed in the corner. His parents had bought it at the Blackwood estate sale last month, proud of finding such an elegant piece. They hadn't noticed how the wooden carvings seemed to writhe in the shadows, how faces appeared and disappeared in its intricate patterns. But Tommy had noticed. Tommy noticed everything about it.
I'm so lonely in here. Please come play.
And like every night, Tommy was paralyzed with terror. He let out a silent scream before managing to find his voice, desperately calling for his parents. The words tore from his throat, echoing through the dark house. He heard footsteps thunder down the hallway. His mother and father burst into the room, their expressions a familiar mix of concern and weariness. His mother's gentle voice couldn't hide her exhaustion as she tried to soothe him, while his father moved straight to the armoire, yanking open its doors. They went through their usual reassurances. Nothing there, just shadows, just bad dreams. His father gestured at the hanging clothes and the stack of blankets on the bottom shelf. But Tommy knew better. He'd seen the darkness move behind his winter coat. When they finally left, Tommy pulled his covers up to his chin, knowing tomorrow would bring another sleepless night, another terrifying encounter, another fruitless inspection. This scene had repeated night after night. His parents' patience wore thinner. Their reassurances became tinged with frustration as they reminded him of his age. 8 years old now. Too old for such fears. On the 7th night, something changed. The voice came again, but this time it sounded lonely.
Tommy, I just want a friend.
His parents hadn't come the last 2 times he'd called. They'd told him he needed to be brave, to face his fears. Tommy slipped out of bed, heart hammering against his ribs. The armoire loomed before him, its carved faces seeming to watch his approach. His hand trembled as he reached for the brass handle. The doors creaked open. His clothes hung like dark shapes in the dim light from his nightlight. The voice came again, clearer now.
Back here, Tommy. Just a little further.
He pushed aside the hanging clothes. There should have been a solid back panel, but instead, darkness stretched beyond. The voice giggled, echoing from somewhere deeper inside.
Come closer.
Tommy hesitated. His mind screamed to run back to bed, but curiosity pulled at him like a fishhook behind his navel. He took one step into the darkness, then another. The clothes brushed against his face as he ventured deeper inside the wardrobe. Somehow, the air grew colder with each step. He could barely see now, but the voice kept calling, always just a little further ahead. When Tommy turned back, he couldn't see his room anymore, replaced by an endless darkness in every direction. Panic seized him as he realized he was trapped. He started screaming, calling his parents, hoping that this time they will hear his pleas and come to help him. But he felt that his voice died in that void. Then he heard them, the familiar footsteps on the hallway, and he knew his parents were rushing in. He pressed against the darkness and found it solid, like a wall of black ice. But where his hands touched this cold barrier, it became transparent, like a window into his old life. He watched his parents burst into his room, and there, sitting in his bed, was something wearing his face. It looked exactly like him, down to the small scar on his chin from falling off his bike. But its smile was wrong somehow. Too wide, too knowing. "I'm here!" he screamed. "That's not me!" But his cries went unheard as he watched his parents embrace the thing that had stolen his place. Through the black barrier, Tommy watched helplessly as his parents hugged the imposter, tucked him into the bed, and left the room, leaving him truly alone in the darkness. Hours stretched into days, as on the other side, his life played out like scenes from a twisted play. The creature wore his face perfectly, acing his math test, hugging his little sister, telling his parents, "I love you," with his voice. But in quiet moments when no one was watching, it would turn to the barrier and smile that wrong smile. Sometimes it would wave, wiggling fingers that seemed too long, too sharp. The darkness pressed closer with each passing day until Tommy could barely remember warmth, until he began to forget what sunlight felt like. As time lost meaning in the void, Tommy wandered deeper into the endless black. Until one night, he heard something new, a little girl's voice calling out for her parents. Tommy smiled. His teeth gleamed in the darkness.
Come play with me.
Our second story is titled, What Cats See.
If you find this recording, I need to explain what happened. All of it started with this stupid TikTok challenge. What cats see? I thought it was harmless, just another viral trend. The idea was to stare into your cat's eyes when they're fixated on something. Try to see what they're seeing. People claimed cats can perceive things beyond our reality, and if you catch the right angle in their eyes, you might glimpse it too. I decided to try it with Salem, my black cat. He was always staring at blank walls or empty corners. I figured, why not? So that night, I waited until Salem got that faraway look. He was perched on the dresser, staring intently at the corner of my bedroom, above my wardrobe, that massive antique piece my parents bought when the Thompson house was sold. I remember shifting on my bed, trying to get the perfect angle. My eyes were watering, but I didn't dare blink. And then, in his eyes, in that tiny golden reflection, something moved in the darkness of my closet. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or my eyes playing tricks after staring for so long. But then I saw it again. 6 arms unfurled from the inky blackness, each ending in razor-sharp claws. They gripped the edges of my closet, pulling the rest of its body into view. 2 goat-like legs dangled beneath, covered in matted fur. But its face, oh God, its face. It was like staring into an abyss, a void of pure darkness with 2 pinpricks of hellish red light where eyes should be. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was paralyzed with fear. The creature moved with unnatural grace, using its multiple limbs to crawl across the ceiling like some nightmarish spider. Its legs swayed lifelessly below it as it inched closer and closer to where I sat, frozen on my bed. The monster paused directly overhead, its red eyes boring into mine. The stench of sulfur and decay filled my nostrils as its maw opened, revealing rows of needle-like teeth and a long forked tongue. Then, with lightning speed, it dropped. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for impact, but instead of razor-sharp claws tearing into my flesh, I felt nothing. Trembling, I cracked open one eye. The monster was gone, and Salem was still sat perched on the dresser. My heart still racing, I fumbled for my phone. My fingers shook as I typed out a message to my best friend. Holy shit. It worked. the challenge actually worked. The reply came almost instantly. "No way! What did you see? I want to try it too." I should have said no. Should have known better. But I didn't. When Emma came over, we waited until my parents were asleep. I guided Emma to sit on my bed, positioning her exactly as I had been. Salem was in the same spot on the dresser, his gaze fixed on that corner above the wardrobe. I watched as she leaned forward, aligning her eyes with Salem's. My stomach churned with guilt and fear. What if it appeared again? What if it hurt her? Seconds ticked by, Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. Then, suddenly, her eyes widened. I saw the exact moment it appeared, reflected in the growing terror on her face. But something was different this time. My eyes were drawn to the same spot, and suddenly, I could see it too. The creature moved with that same unnatural grace, its 6 arms propelling it across the ceiling. But this time, it wasn't focused on me. Its crimson eyes were fixed solely on Emma. I watched in horror as Emma's expression shifted. The initial terror melted away, replaced by something else. A disturbing fascination crept across her features. She slowly raised her hand upward as if in a trance. "Emma, no!" I cried, but it was too late. Her fingers brushed against one of the creature's razor-sharp claws, and instantly a crimson mark bloomed across her cheek, spreading like spilled ink. As I watched in horror, Emma's eyes began to darken, the whites turning an inky black. Without thinking, I lunged forward and shoved her hard, sending her toppling backward off the bed with a startled cry. In that same moment, Salem launched himself from the dresser, raking his claws across Emma's arm as he bolted from the room. The spell shattered like glass. Emma blinked rapidly, her eyes clearing as the red mark on her cheek faded to nothing. Emma and I didn't speak about what happened that night. We went to sleep and pretended nothing had occurred. 3 days passed, and Emma didn't come to school. The teacher said she had the flu, but I knew better. I tried texting her, calling her house, but there was no response. Then, on the 4th day, I was walking home from school when I saw my mother standing outside our house, waiting for me. She told me Emma's parents were dead. Carbon monoxide poisoning, they said. An accident with their furnace. I'm at their funeral now. Emma's here too, standing by their caskets. She just turned to look at me, and in her eyes' reflection, I can see it. That 6-armed figure, burning like coal and void, its backwards arms curled around her shoulders like a lover's embrace. And she's smiling. God help me, she's smiling.
Our third story is titled The Peephole.
"I told you not to look," my brother Laurie whispers now, as I lie in my bed, burning with fever. "I told you that house was cursed." But he hadn't told me. Not really. Instead, he'd made it into a game that summer afternoon, daring me to follow him to the old Thompson house. Everyone in town knew the story. How their little boy had vanished without a trace decades ago. How the family had moved away shortly after, leaving everything behind. The house had passed through several owners since then, each staying briefly before fleeing, until the Blackwoods became its last residence. Now it stood empty, its overgrown garden and broken windows a testament to years of abandonment. "Go on," he'd urged, lifting me up to the rusty keyhole. "Tell me what you see." The late afternoon light sliced through broken windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in the stale air. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long, mouldering strips like shed snakeskin. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister half collapsed, leading into darkness. But what drew my eye was the massive antique armoire that dominated the entrance hall. Its wood dark with age, its carvings seeming to writhe in the shadows. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out more details through the keyhole. The armoire's doors stood slightly ajar, and there, sitting perfectly poised inside, was a porcelain doll. She was pristine and perfect amid the decay, her long black ringlets framed by faded blue ribbons that matched her Victorian dress. The dress itself was immaculate, layers of lace and silk, untouched by the rot around her. But it was her eyes that made me gasp. They weren't the usual painted blue or brown, but a deep, unnatural amber, like ancient tree sap. And they were looking right at me. "She's wearing a blue dress," I started to tell Tommy, but when I turned around, his face had gone white. "I made that up," he stammered. "The doll story. I made it up to scare you." That night, I dreamed I was back at the keyhole, but this time, when I pressed my eye against it, the door simply vanished. I stumbled forward into that rotting parlor, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The air was thick with decay, coating my tongue with the taste of old death. The massive armoire loomed before me, its doors now wide open. The doll sat exactly as I'd seen her before, but now her head was turned to follow my movement. A smile cracked across her porcelain face, too wide, too many teeth. Her amber eyes seemed to glow in the dimness.
Would you like to play?
The voice was wrong, like breaking glass wrapped in silk. She raised one tiny hand, fingers too long and jointed in too many places.
I've been so lonely.
I tried to run, but the door behind me had disappeared. There were only walls now, the peeling wallpaper writhing like living things. I heard her porcelain limbs clicking as she climbed down from her perch inside the armoire, each movement jerky and wrong, like a puppet with too many strings. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The fever had started. In my dreams, I hear her porcelain feet clicking across wooden floors. Her amber eyes grow larger, filling my vision. Sometimes I wake to find blue ribbons on my pillow, but when I try to grab them, they dissolve like cobwebs. Mom says I'm just sick, that it will pass. But I've seen her worried glances, heard her whispering on the phone about the other children in town who've fallen ill after walking past that house. Today, she went to an antique store, convinced that surrounding me with happy things might help break the fever. I hear her footsteps on the stairs now. She's calling my name, saying she has a surprise, something special she found at an estate sale. Through my fever haze, I see her in my doorway, holding something in her hands, something wearing a blue dress, something with amber eyes.
And so, dear listeners, the Tattered Book closes on these tales of cursed legacies. But remember, some objects carry more than just memories within their frames. In every home, in every room, innocent things wait patiently, gathering shadows, collecting souls, passing their dark gifts from one generation to the next. After all, every mirror, every wardrobe, every innocent toy might be waiting for its next keeper. If you dare to delve deeper into these eldritch mysteries, subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review, and whisper of our tales to others. Your engagement feeds the book, fueling the terrors yet to come. Until next time, and may your nights be sleepless and your dreams unsettling.